ओके, तर YouTube चेक करा एकदा.
हो, डन डन झालं.
गुड इवनिंग, वेलकम टू डिजिटल नालंदा. डिजिटल नालंदा का ये हमारा स्पेशल सेशन है, क्यूरियोसिटी लेक्चर्स, जो नालंदा अभियान लैब्स द्वारा प्रस्तुत है. और इसमें हम साइंस क्षेत्र के विभिन्न जो नए जमाने की क्यूरियोसिटी पैदा करने वाली अनेक विषयों से हम रूबरू होते हैं, और अनेक एक्सपर्ट्स हमको इस बारे में गाइड करते हैं. आज आज का जो हमारा सेशन है वो बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट, और जिसको हम कहते हैं एक यूनिक सा है, बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग सा आज का सेशन है. और हमारे साथ आज जुड़े हैं प्रोफेसर चैतन्य गोखले सर. वेलकम सर. And also, I would like to like give a brief introduction of Chaitanya sir. Just a minute. I think I lost some feed of. Just a minute. Sorry. ओके, तो हमारे साथ आज जुड़े हैं प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर चैतन्य गोखले, जो सैद्धांतिक जीव विज्ञान के प्रोफेसर हैं. और जिस तरह ये इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी फील्ड्स का आजकल चलन है, और उसी को लेकर के हम आज जुड़े हैं. तो सर की जो फील्ड है थियोरेटिकल बायोलॉजी, और वो सर वुर्ज़बर्ग जर्मनी में सेंटर फॉर कंप्यूटेशनल एंड थियोरेटिकल बायोलॉजी में सर प्रोफेसर है. इनका जो व्याप है पढ़ाई का, और उसका जो एक निचोड़ है, सर आज हमारे साथ में साझा करने वाले हैं. मैं ज्यादा और आपका समय ना लेते हुए मैं चाहूंगा डॉक्टर चैतन्य अपनी सेशन शुरू करेंगे सर.
Good. Thank you, Subodh. Hope you can hear me well. Is that good? Okay, nice. Yeah, exactly. As Subodh mentioned, my name is Chaitanya Gokhale, and originally I'm from Pune. So, बोलवल्याबद्दल या लेक्चर सिरीज मध्ये धन्यवाद. मला हिंदी एवढा कॉन्फिडन्स नाहीये, त्यामुळे that's why I'll give the talk actually in English. पण मराठीमध्ये जर काही कोणाला प्रश्न असतील तर मग नंतर विचारले तरी चालेल. So I'll try to answer questions as much as possible later on as well. But feel free to ask questions in the different languages that people know here. So hopefully we can translate and it'll be fine. Right. So the topic of the talk is actually Narrans, collective narratives and cooperation. And it might sound very off topic, like what exactly is this about, right? I mean, that might be very confusing. So let's start by some definitions, and maybe then it'll be clear what I'm actually going to talk about. And let's go to Narrans. And this is actually comes from a quote from Terry Pratchett, so who's a very famous fiction author. And what he wrote was that the anthropologists actually got it wrong when they named our species Homo sapiens, which is typically said as the wise man. And he said that in any case, it's very arrogant and big-headed thing to say, because you say it yourself, especially wisdom being one of our least evident features. In reality, we are pan-Narrans, so the storytelling chimpanzee. That's what he likes to call that. We are very much into stories, and we are embedded into a whole society which is based on storytelling, or at least it gives an importance to storytelling, which we actually sometimes totally even forget that the stories exist. And one of the things that can help us understand this is by looking at different kinds of narratives, different kinds of storytellings. And one of the things that we tell us ourselves are sometimes what are known as personal narratives. And this is something that we know from childhood. Many times You might have seen these kind of books, right? Like the baby's first 5 years, or you can put pictures of what we did for the first 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and that keeps on going. So what we are trying to build is a narrative. Like what happened to the baby? Like how did this person change since basically being a toddler and all around. So that's kind of like a personal narrative. And the first thing that you kind of introduce yourself, I was like, okay, what do you do? Who am I? Just like Subodh introduced me, like what is my narrative, right? Like what am I doing? So these are kind of what we call as personal narratives. But there are also some things known as collective narratives. And what basically are these collective narratives then? Well, collective narratives, and that's something that we will be focusing on actually, um, are social engines. So you can think of them as social engines for sense making in a complex and confusing world. Our world is very complex. There are too many things going on at all the time, and we need to understand. Our brain needs to understand what is happening around. And collective narratives are some kinds of social engines. They are some kind of a tool which actually help us get a firm foundation for current and future oriented action plans. They can help us make plans. They can help design a commonly shared framework, which will help us cooperate between each other. And it kind of gives us an impression of reliability and predictability. Because the world is very complex, we actually can't say for sure what is going to happen in the future, but we have some expectations, and building on those expectations, then we can make plans. And that's basically the idea. These kind of collective narratives give us an idea of what might happen in the future or what our expectations are, so that we can make plans and do some stuff with it. So it's a tool for sense making, and humans are very good at that actually. Because humans are very good at even inventing causality for randomly occurring events, right? If something happens somewhere, we can just say that, oh, it happened because of that, right? You can just come up with some randomly occurring random events, which you might start to make connections, right? Like it's maybe it's bad to walk under a ladder, because sometimes it happens that the ladders fall and you might hurt yourself. So clearly, but then you start making this causality connections that maybe it's always bad to walk under ladders. And that's what actually is something that motivated us. And one of the things that we were really interested in, um, do you know how on the screen there are drawings that people have made, or have I made them by mistake? Can we erase them, or no, it's not possible? There are some red lines, right? Can you see them, or is it just me who sees them?
I think yes, yes. I think wait.
Okay, so just have a look if you can. Okay, it's not distracting me so much, but just if people are interested, like,
I thought that those are on the presentation. Now that
no, these are not. I think some
yeah,
people did some scribbles also. I think one
yeah,
can do
I
that in
think
Zoom. Anyways,
so.
so the question actually that we were interested in, like, where do these such kind of collective beliefs, collective stories come from? Uh, it might sound weird, but we were actually interested in trying to figure out where money comes from, where the concept of money basically comes from. Like, where do we come up with this idea that this piece of metal that we have in front of us has some value, right? You can take this piece of metal, you can take a piece of paper, go to a shop. Thank you, Subodh. Go to a shop and actually exchange it for food, right? Now, food is something that we understand. We can buy food, we can get the food, and then we can actually eat it. And that helps us physiologically, right? It helps our biology. But how do I convince someone else that, look, you give me food, which is a very important resource, and I give you this piece of metal or this piece of paper, and that should work. Now, if you think about it, it's very bizarre. It's a crazy idea, but why would this even work? And that's because this is a device, this is a tool that we actually imbue with value. We give it value. But the thing is, one person giving it the value doesn't really work, right? The whole society needs to give value to this one particular piece of metal, and then it will work. And we know that very clearly, that this is an imagined concept when you think of the times when it does not work, right? When it does not work as an imagined concept. Now, if you can imagine the things on the right hand side over here, that's what happened when we demonetized, right? some of these currencies. And you can imagine overnight, you can just say that this piece of paper is now worthless. It doesn't have any value. So there is no particular value in that piece of paper itself, right? Just because someone says it actually gets the value that we tell that it has. And this is one of the classic concepts of collective belief. It's a collective narrative that we all agree to be true. And it is true because we all agree to be true. And that's, yeah, please.
सॉरी सर, तो सर मैं ये हिंदी में थोड़ा जल्दी एक ये दे दो आइडिया।
Perfect. I'll pause
ओके।
away.
तो जैसे चैतन्य सर ने शुरू किया कि हमारा टॉपिक जो है पैन नैरेंस, इसके बारे में ही मुख्यतः तौर पे जब चर्चा होती है तो ये क्यों रखा गया। तो सर ने ट्रेरी प्रेचिट का एक कथन दिया है जिसमें हम बताया गया कि होमो सेपियंस यानी वाइज मैन बोल के हमारा नामकरण किया गया, जो कि सर कहते हैं कि ये ट्रेरी कहते हैं कि ये सही नहीं है। हमारा असली नाम होना चाहिए पैन नैरेंस यानी कहानी कहने वाले मानव, क्योंकि हम कहानी गढ़ते जाते हैं और फैलाते जाते हैं। हमने कभी हम विजडम से काम से ज्यादा हम कहानियों के बेस पर एक डिपेंडेंसी हम क्रिएट करते हैं। सर ने नैरेटिव्स की बात की, पर्सनल नैरेटिव्स और कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव्स के बारे में। उसमें पर्सनल नैरेटिव्स एक बोला है कि जो अ, एक एक इंसान को लेकर के या एक किसी भी व्यक्ति को लेकर के जो नैरेटिव्स या कहानी रची जाती है उसके बारे में। जैसे ये एग्जांपल दिया था सर ने बेबी बुक का, और उसकी शुरुआत जब बेबी को आप किसी भी तरह की अ, रचनाएं बताते हैं या कुछ बताते हैं तो वो उससे रिलेटेड करता है। लेकिन जब आप कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव की बात करते हैं, वो चीजें हैं आपकी सबसे डिसीजन को ड्राइव करने वाली या सेंस मेकिंग करने वाली। तो क्यों आज का जो विषय है उसको लेकर के सबसे उसका एक पिलर बोल के आज डिस्कस हो रहा है कि क्यों कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव इम्पोर्टेंट है। तो ये क्या करता है आपकी वैल्यू जनरेशन का, प्रेडिक्टेबिलिटी का, और जिसे हम कहते हैं कि हम बोलते हैं ना आपस में बात करते हैं, हाँ दिस मेक सेंस, हाँ ये बात तो सही लग रही है। तो ये लग रही वाला जो शेयर्ड वाला जो बिलीफ है, कंसेप्ट है, इस बारे में ये एक टूल है, सर ने जैसे कहा। और जैसे सर ने एग्जांपल दिया रुपए का या करेंसी का, तो अ, खाने के एक्सचेंज में आपने किस तरह कन्विंस किया आगे वाले को कि ये 1 रुपए के एवज में मुझे ये चॉकलेट या मुझे ये खाना मिलेगा, और उसकी वो वैल्यू जनरेट करना। वैल्यू जनरेट करने के लिए आपको एक कलेक्टिव उसका एक एक्सेप्टेंस जरूरी था। और उस वजह से आप किसी भी करेंसी को वैल्यू या उसको, जैसे आजकल 1000 की नोट 500 की डीमोनेटाइज हुई, तो वो क्यों हुई है? क्योंकि उसको एक एक्सेप्टेबल एक डिवैल्यूएशन मिला है। और किसी भी चीज का वैल्यूएशन होना मतलब उसको कलेक्टिव एक्सेप्टेंस हुआ है, और उस वजह से उस टूल की या उस रुपये की करेंसी की वैल्यू आई है। ये सर सॉरी।
Thank you. Yes, I'll continue. Please tell me to stop exactly when you feel like I should. Yeah. Right. So let's say that was the problem that we started with, but then we thought like, okay, that's kind of a solved question. So maybe we understand how money works, let's say. But the thing is, what are other such collective narratives? What are the examples of such collective narratives? And more importantly, why are they even told? Like, why do we have such a complex system? And it is pretty complicated, right? Like, why do I need to have this exchange material in between so that I can give you food and things like that? Because we can't really convince each other what the value is of food as such. Is that a problem for us? Like, what are other such stories, right, that are told, and why are they told? So that was a bit broader question that we decided to ask. And before we go there, what I would suggest is we go through a small tour through the concept of perception, right? How do we perceive the world outside? As I said at the beginning, this is a tool to reduce the complexity of the world around us. So first we should understand how we actually understand the world, right? And let's give it a short example, right? What I want to do is that I want to open this box over here, right? The very first thing is that I should accept the reality that the box is closed. Because first, if I accept the reality that the box is closed, then I will kind of think about, okay, my goal is then to open the box. Then I need to make some kind of a decision that given the current model of reality, what kind of skills do I have so that I can form an intention, right? That I want to use the skills on that closed box. So in the end, I will open the box, right? So once I form this intention, maybe I can then finally say that, okay, now I will do it. And once I do it, I realize, I am able to open the box, or there was a failure. I did not open the box, or there was some other thing happened. I had an accident because I actually cut my own finger or something, right? There can be mistakes that can happen. So there are different things that can happen once you start to do an action on a reality that you have perceived. And if I do that, then what I do is I actually build, uh, per, sorry, let me go back. I actually have to kind of make sure that I have the correct definition of the reality to start with. That was the very first thing that we started with. But the problem is, and this problem is actually also one of the definitions of consciousness, which is that of the subjective experience of the world, right? Each one of us experiences the world slightly differently. And that's because there is a bit of a difference, right? Okay, maybe not everything differently, but some things differently. For example, some things you can imagine to be exactly the same, like objective things. Like there is a predator, there is a prey, there is a rock, there are some trees. You can say that, okay, there is a rock. Yes, there is a rock. Maybe people mostly agree, right? There is a rock. If you show that there is a rock. What could be subjective? Things like, what is that smell, right? You can smell something in the room. There's like, you think might be there is a smell. I don't smell anything. Is that smell good? Is that smell not good? You went to see a movie with your friends. Do you like the movie? Did your friend like the movie? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe there was a difference. Maybe you liked the movie, your friend did not like the movie. Subjective experience of the world. A simple example for this is given below. On the left, I say that I have the RGB scale, red, green, blue, and you can put it from 255 to 0. And if I show the number on the left-hand side, you can say that, I know exactly, that is red. That is supposed to be red. It's an objective truth, as long we all agree what numbers are. But on the right-hand side, you see this color, and I ask you, is that red? Well, some people will say that, yes, it is very red. Depending on your eyesight, you could say that, no, it's not very red. Some people might not see red, right, as clearly as you do because of the cones of your eyes. Maybe there are defective cones in the red ones. So that might be an issue. So the thing is, that would be a subjective experience. And if you ask, actually, the one on the right is not exactly the same as 25500. So actually, there is a bit of a difference. Although we might classify it as red because we have some kind of an error correction mechanism, right, in our brains. So subjectivity in the truth can actually then cause a problem for joint action. So earlier I said, I wanted to open the box, right? Maybe you make a mistake, you learn from it, and that's it. That adds to your personal narrative. But let's say, in this case, we want to open the box, right? We want to open it together. So there is this box, and you have a particular set of skills, and I have a particular set of skills. Maybe I am very good at holding the box. Maybe you are very good at using the cutter, right? So I hold the box, you cut the box. But for that, again, we have the same problem. We both should have the same model of the current reality, right? We should both, first of all, agree that the box is closed. If for you the box is not closed and for me the box is open, for me the box is closed, then we already have a problem, right? We cannot do this thing together. And that exactly is the point where we make use of this concept of intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity is basically something that allows us to solve this problem of having different subjective experiences of the world. Intersubjectivity, in the most simple terms, it says it refers to a shared meaning of something in the world or a process of mutual communication towards an agreement of meaning, right? So maybe you have a cup in front of you. I have this glass or mug in front of me. Maybe some other people might have a glass, but we all agree these are different things. But we all agree we can use this to drink something, right? And that's an agreement that we do. I'm not going to use this to eat an apple, and that's clear, right? We just agree that that's the meaning. And actually, such kind of meanings, such kind of stories exist all around us. Like money was one of the examples, but you can think of animal spirits, gods, demons, human rights, even companies, right? We give them the value, and that then we all agree that yes, they do have a legal standing as an individual, right? That we agree for a company. And these kind of things are known as intersubjective truths. Maybe, Subodh? Yeah. Maybe, maybe I'll just
Yes, yes, sir.
maybe
Okay.
a few examples of such intersubjective truths. First of all, as I just mentioned, you could have religions, you could have different kinds of monetary systems, just like rupees, dollars, but they all have their own levels, and we agree that they have their own levels. You have companies, as I mentioned, you can have following some of that. And I somehow come from the state of Maharashtra, so somehow I should have this conception of the state of Maharashtra in my head, because apparently this boundary is something which is very strong, because that kind of connects to the word Maharashtra, right? As soon as I step beyond it, maybe it's something very different. Physically, it might make no difference, but mentally in our heads, we make this difference because of the story that we tell of what it means, right? Yeah, I can go back a few slides if you want.
Yes. तो अब कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव्स की बात की, यानी आपकी एक सामाजिक सामाजिक जिसको हम कहते हैं कहानीकरण, या कलेक्टिव कहानीकरण की जब बात होती है, तो उसके नेक्स्ट उसका उसके बाद में हम सर ने हमको परसेप्शन यानी अपना जो देखने का नजरिया, उसके उसके थ्रू आपको ले गए हैं। और नजरिया जो है, आप सब जानते हैं कि सबका अलग होता है, अलग होने की वजह से ही अ, जो भिन्नता होती है वो होती है। लेकिन जैसे एक यहाँ एग्जांपल दिया है कि मुझे एक डब्बा खोलना है, वो गोल है मेरा, और मेरा एक इंटेंशन जो था, उसको मैंने बॉक्स खोलने की तरफ जो भी मेरी एक्शन रही है, उसको उठा के खोलना है, रख के खोलना है, जो भी किया, उसको लेकर के मेरी जो एक्शन रही है, वो एक मेरी इंडिविजुअल एक्शन रही। ठीक है। और उसके बाद जब हम देखते हैं कि यही चीज ऑब्जेक्टिव और सब्जेक्टिव लिहाज से हम देखें, एक एक पायदान और आगे लें, तो ऑब्जेक्टिव में ये एक है कि लगभग सभी के लिए वो एक ठोस चीज है, या ठोस एक थिंग है। तो जैसे पत्थर है, पेड़ है, ये ऑब्जेक्टिव चीजें हैं, जैसे आपको सबको पता है कि ये वही चीज। लेकिन सब्जेक्टिव क्या है? सब्जेक्टिव यानी ये बहुत ही इंडिविजुअल है, कि मुझे ऐसी स्मेल आ रही है, आपको भी वैसी स्मेल आ रही है क्या? या मुझे एक मूवी बिल्कुल अच्छी नहीं लगी, आपको वो मूवी अच्छी लग रही है। सर ने यहाँ बहुत बेहतरीन एग्जाम्पल दिया है कि ये जो रेड कलर है, उसमें RGB, ये हम लोग कोड जब भी हम डिजाइन करते हैं, वहाँ ये कोड हमको लिखने होते हैं कलर के। तो RGB नंबर रूप में जो रेड कलर है वो 25500 है, ये आपकी ऑब्जेक्टिव रियलिटी है। लेकिन अब जो ये सब्जेक्टिव वर्ल्ड में, क्या ये रेड कलर है? मे बी बहुत लोग के लिए रेड कलर है, लेकिन कुछ लोग कलर ब्लाइंड है, या कुछ लोग का रेड का शायद मसला है, उनके लिए कुछ और ये हो सकता है। लेकिन इसी इसी वजह से क्या होता है कि सब्जेक्टिविटी का, या जिसको सर ने बोला है इंटर सब्जेक्टिविटी का, यहाँ पर अ, 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 गढ़ा गढ़ा गया। और इस वजह से क्या है कि जॉइंट या म्यूचुअल एक्शन की यहाँ पे जरूरत पड़ेगी, क्योंकि आपको हमेशा चाहिए कि कोई ना कोई उस चीज को रिकॉग्नाइज करे, और उस चीज की मीनिंग जनरेशन में आपका एक साथ दे। तो इस तरह से ही जब जॉइंट एफर्ट हुए हैं, तो आपका समझो दोनों, दो व्यक्तियों का या ज्यादा व्यक्तियों का एक ही गोल होता है, तब यहाँ पर बात आती है एक्शन की। लेकिन यहाँ खोलने की या जो भी एक्शन करने की, उसका मॉडल भी अगर आपका सिमिलर या सेम हो तो ही वहां बात बनेगी, है ना। तो वो कब बनेगी? तो इसके लिए सर ने यहाँ पर इसका एक रेजोल्यूशन बताया है कि ये इंटर सब्जेक्टिविटी, यानी किसी भी कारण के लिए, किसी भी काम के लिए एक ऐसा एक दूसरे से चर्चा द्वारा, एक दूसरे से कम्युनिकेशन द्वारा एक शेयर्ड मीनिंग जो एक दूसरे को एक्सेप्टेबल, ऐसी चीजें जो जिसके बारे में शायद मैं डायरेक्टली मेरा कुछ अलग मीनिंग हो सकता है, लेकिन म्यूचुअली सारे लोग मिलके हमने एक चीज पर नैरो डाउन किया है। तो ऐसे इन चीजों को इंटर सब्जेक्टिविटी बोलते हैं, और इन चीजों के जो ठोस आयाम हमने दिए होते हैं उसको सर ने बोला है इंटर सब्जेक्टिव ट्रूथ्स, यानी सत्य। तो इसमें क्या क्या सर ने बताया? एनिमल स्पिरिट्स बताया, भगवान बताए हैं, राक्षस बताए हैं, जो मान्यताएं हैं, यानी हम देखते हैं ना, हम ये मानते हैं, हमारा ये मानना है। ह्यूमन राइट्स सर ने वो यहाँ पे एजेंसीज, मनी मनी जैसे बात की, कंपनीज बात की। किसी भी कंपनी आपको फिजिकल फॉर्म में तो दिखती नहीं, लेकिन वो एग्जिस्ट करती है क्योंकि वो एम्प्लॉय या उसके फाउंडर्स से इजाद होती है। तो सर ने यहाँ एग्जाम्पल दिए हैं, मनी का दिया है, जैसे जिस राज्य में हम रहते हैं उस राज्य का एग्जाम्पल, कंपनी दिया है। किसी भी प्रकार की जो उत्पत्ति की सिद्धांत है वो बहुत लोगों के शेयर्ड है। रिलीजन बेसिकली, धर्म जो है, ये सबसे बेहतरीन एग्जाम्पल है इंटर सब्जेक्टिव ट्रूथ्स का, ये सब।
Right. And that's exactly where we are at now, because the thing is, like, this was just the background to let you know, like, okay, these intersubjective realities do exist, and we are all living in each in in them. But the thing is, these intersubjective realities, they have a real impact on our lives, right? They have a real impact because, again, going back to the example of money, you see that there is a value which we give to a piece of metal, but from that you can actually buy food, and food really affects us directly. So that money has power over our biological function now. Religion has power over our biological function. Companies have power. Governments have power over our biological functions, right? And the thing is, that means this process is somehow interesting for evolution. And that's the point why evolutionary theorists as well are trying to figure out, like, why are narratives so essential for all different kinds of societies, right? And one way of looking at is a simple argument. First of all, is there an adaptive value? And that's because the first question that you usually always ask from an evolutionary point of view is that if you see some kind of behavior, some kind of trait in a population, you ask the question, is it helpful? Is it helpful from a biological point of view? And that's the question, that's the point of view of an adaptive value. Is it helpful in some biological way? And for that, let's look at one of the oldest stories, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is like one of an old story in the world, actually, 4,000 years ago, it was written down. And that the elements of that story are such that it teaches us how to cooperate, how to be nice to each other. It just writes down all those details of of a hero who needs to be nice to his first of all, first his enemy, but then he becomes his lifelong friend, right? I mean, that's the story of the Gilgamesh, and how you need to be nice, you need to be humble, and that's the story. This is something that you can see even now in ETA Filipino hunter-gatherer communities. So this is a hunter-gatherer community who live in the forest in the Philippines. And if you look at the stories that they tell each other, right? The stories that they tell each other are different kinds, and I'm happy to share this. I mean, this presentation will be online, so you can read the stories. But the point is, they promote some kind of social norms, right? They say that if you tell this kind of story, it tells you something about sex equality, cooperation between the sexes. Some stories tell you about friendship, about cooperation, about equality, social equality, and how being in a group is good, group cohesion, right? They tell you these kind of stories. And the argument is that, okay, if there are some social norms which the stories promote, right? If the stories tell that these are the things which are good for a well-functioning society, then that society will do good, right? It will function better. So that's an easy answer. One can say that, okay, if there is a story and that story tells you, okay, this is a recipe for a good society, then that's perfect, because then that society will do good, it will survive, and that means the story will also survive. And that's one of the arguments of adaptive storytelling, right? But that's an easy answer, actually. You can say that, that is the reason, and that's why the stories exist, right? Because they help the society. A much harder question is, what about drift? And by drift, I mean stories which don't really have a clear moral dictum. The stories that don't really tell you exactly that this was the right thing to do and this was the wrong thing to do, right? You might all know the story of Yudhishthir, right? Yudhishthir, when he was in the during the Kurukshetra war, no, he went and said to Drona that, yeah, Ashwatthama is dead. But then he muttered like, "Oh, Ashwatthama, actually the elephant, Ashwatthama." But he wasn't very clear about that, right? That's the story that we hear. So what we hear from this is that Yudhishthir, who is well known to be a very noble, very honest, very like the epitome of honesty and all, he did something bad, but somehow it was a necessary deception. And this is kind of like the idea which that story tells us, that the duty can be context dependent, right? It's not that this is always good and this is always bad. It's hard to say what is right and what is wrong in this case. So that means there is no clear moral to take away from this. Like, what is the moral? Like, you should lie sometimes, or you should always not tell the truth. But that's not a good thing either. So what is the outcome of this story, right? There is no clear moral dictum as such. That, okay, given the case, what should you do? It just says it's context dependent, right? Depending on what you need, that's the right thing. And this is something that we decided to understand together with Marcus Frian and Joseph Bulbulia, both the collaborators from New Zealand. Marcus is a computer scientist and Joseph is a cultural psychologist. And so we decided to work together across different disciplines and try to understand what happens when there are these stories which don't really have a very clear moral standing. How do we understand the existence of such stories, and do they have an effect? Right? And for understanding that, we will actually look at how intersubjectivity then actually works. All right, maybe Subal.
तो जैसे सर ने बताया कि ये जो कलेक्टिव सब्जेक्टिविटी है, क्योंकि एक समाज बनाने में, एक इंडिविजुअल बनाने में बहुत कारगर है। तो क्या हम देखते हैं कि इसका बायोलॉजिकल इम्पैक्ट है? बायोलॉजिकल यानी किसी भी मानव के ग्रोथ में, या मानव के एवोल्यूशन में। एवोल्यूशन होते जा रहा है, आप भी जानते हैं, हम भी एक ट्रांजिशन जनरेशन है, हमारे बाद भी जनरेशन आ ही रही। तो क्या इन नैरेटिव्स का प्रभाव है? क्या इनकी एडेप्टिव वैल्यू है? इस पर ही सर ने गौर किया। तो जैसे सर ने दो नैरेटिव्स बताए कि 4000 साल पहले ये जो गिलगामेश की जो टैबलेट्स आती थी, उसमें स्टोरीज बताई कि कैसे जुड़ाव मेंटेन करे, कोऑपरेट करे एक दूसरे से, समाज में कैसे रहे। तो इस तरह के वहाँ पे नैरेटिव रखे गए, और कहीं ना कहीं इन्होंने इम्पैक्ट भी किया है। अब ये अक्ता फिलिपिनो हंटर गैदरर जो पॉपुलेशन है, उनकी अपनी एक वहाँ पे स्टोरी टेलिंग है, जहाँ पे इक्वालिटी के बारे में, जेंडर इक्वालिटी के बारे में, दोस्ती के बारे में, सभी लोग को साथ लेने के बारे में भी वहाँ पर नैरेटिव्स बताई है, और ये इम्पैक्ट करता गया। लेकिन यहाँ पर देखिए कि क्या और जब ये एक्सेप्टेबिलिटी हो जाती है, जब इन स्टोरीज के ऊपर काम शुरू होता है, तो ये माना जाता है कि
It was cutting out a bit.
फिर से मैं बोल, तो जब ये स्टोरीज जो है ये फॉलो होती है, एक्सेप्टेड होती है, इस पर समाज काम करता है, तैयारी करता है, तो ये माना जाता है कि ये स्टोरीज कारगर। लेकिन क्या हमेशा से ऐसा रहे? सभी स्टोरीज को क्या एक मॉरल बेस या कोई कोई जिसको हम कहते हैं कि उसका एक इम्पैक्ट वैसा है? नहीं। तो इसे सर ने बोला है ड्रिफ्ट। ड्रिफ्ट यानी ऐसी चीजें जिनका कोई डायरेक्ट मीनिंग या डायरेक्ट उसका इम्पैक्ट हम देख नहीं पाते। जैसे युधिष्ठिर की सर ने स्टोरी बताई कि अश्वत्थामा की मौत हो चुकी है, और चुप के एकदम कम स्वरों में बोला कि अश्वत्थामा हाथी की मौत हुई है। तो अब जैसे बोलते हैं ना, चलन में है कि वो झूठ जो अच्छे के लिए बोला जाए वो अच्छा होता है। तो झूठ सच का कुछ यहाँ होता नहीं। लेकिन हम क्या माने कि ये कंटेक्स्ट डिपेंडेंसी, और जिसको हम कहते हैं कि किसी भी वातावरण को या किसी आई हुई मौके को देखकर बिहेव करना, क्या इसको मॉरल माना जाए नहीं माना जाए? अब इन चीजों को लेकर ही बेसिकली ये ड्रिफ्ट है कि हर चीज इतनी क्रिस्टल क्लियर या डायरेक्ट नहीं होती है। बहुत सारी चीजें बिना क्लैरिटी के, बिना बिना कंटेक्स्ट के हम नहीं देख पाते। तो क्या इसका प्रभाव होगा? तो सर ने जैसे कहा, न्यूजीलैंड के दो साइंटिस्ट हैं, एक कल्चरल साइंटिस्ट, एक कंप्यूटर साइंसेस, जो इस पर काम कर रहे हैं, शोध कर रहे हैं। और ऐसी स्टोरीज जिनका शायद कोई मीनिंग एकदम से क्लियर नहीं है या उनका इम्पैक्ट क्लियर नहीं, उस पर ये शोधकर्ता अपना काम कर रहे हैं।
Thank you. Right. And that's exactly where we now switch to this making things a bit more precise, right? I was telling a bit more about more philosophical or more psychological arguments, but now let's try to make things a little bit more precise, right? How would intersubjectivity work for stories which don't really have any clear meaning, right? Let's try to study that. And for that, we need to go back in time. Let's see, this was like a long time ago when humans were on the plains of Africa and we were hunting and gathering over there. And if you think about hunting and gathering, let's try to look at a specific example of hunting, right? Like maybe not all of you are aware of evolutionary games, so I will be very slow and try to be very clear about it. Um, and Subodh will clarify this, I hope, on my behalf. So the idea over here is that you want to go out for hunting, right? You want to go out and you want to get some food. So you could go out and you have two options. You can go for a stag, which is given over here. That's the first line. Or you could go for a hare, right? You have two options. You can go out for hunting a hare. And when you go out for hunting a hare, you can always get a hare. That's the rabbit over here, as you see. You can always get it. But the stag, getting the stag is a bit tricky because that's where you have to actually see what your partner is doing. And that is this column, right? The columns. Now, if your partner is also hunting a stag, then you will get a stag. That's what this image shows, that this is what you get. You get a stag because you are hunting a stag, your partner is also hunting a stag. And so the idea behind that is like, it's a big animal, a stag, a deer, it's a big animal. So you have to kind of, you come from the left, I come from the right, and then we catch it and things like that, right? So it's a bit tricky to catch a stag. Hare, you can catch it by yourself, it's easy. But the thing is, if you go for the stag and your partner goes for the hare, then your partner will get the hare because they will always get it, but you will not get anything, right? You will get zero. And that is what is known as the stag hunt. It's rather the problem of the stag hunt. Because if you think about it, how do we solve the problem? Well, you need to have enough stag hunters in the population, right? You need to have, let's say, more than 20% in this case, right? Stag hunters in the population. And if you have enough stag hunters in the population, then everyone will be hunting stags. Because the idea is, okay, if I'm randomly connected to someone in the population, will they be a stag hunter or a hare hunter, right? And so given some values of the stag and the hare, you can calculate this point and say, if there are more than a certain number of stag hunters in the population, then it's good to hunt stag. But below that, it is always good to hunt hares, right? You can always be on the left-hand side here, where everyone is hunting hares. That's what the fraction says here. Fraction of stag hunters goes from 0 to 1. So that means when it is 0, everyone is hunting hares. When it is 1, everyone is hunting stags. And what this example tells us is that there is a tension, right? There is a certain tension between a smaller secure gain. So you can get the hare easily by yourself, but it's a small hare, right? It's a small animal. You can get that. Versus a larger, unsure, and collectively acquired benefit. So you're not sure that you will get the stag because it's hard to get the stag because you need to know that your partner is also hunting stag. And that's why it is unsure, because you don't know what your partner is doing. But if they are also hunting stag, then you get a really big reward. You get this big stag. I hope this part is clear. So maybe let's just go through this once again with Subodh.
अब इसी पशुपश इंटरसब्जेक्टिविटी को लेकर थोड़ा और जिसको बोलते हैं डीप में जाते हुए एक बेसिक स्टैग हंट का एक हम स्टोरी देखते हैं जिसमें स्टैग यानी हिरन और रैबिट जिसको हम कहते हैं। तो यहाँ पर जो आप देख रहे हैं कि अगर आपको हिरन पकड़ना है तो आप अकेले नहीं पकड़ सकते, आपको हमेशा एक पार्टनर की या एक साथी की जरूरत पड़ती है। लेकिन आपको अगर रैबिट पकड़ना है तो उसको आप अकेले पकड़ सकते हैं। तो यहाँ जैसे आप देख रहे हैं कि ये जो ग्रिड बना है, इस ग्रिड में देखा है कि आप स्टैग पकड़ रहे हो और आपका पार्टनर स्टैग पकड़ रहा है, तो आपको चांसेस है कि आप स्टैग का शिकार कर सकते हैं, हिरन का शिकार कर सकते हैं। आप और आपका पार्टनर रैबिट पकड़ रहे हैं तो दोनों को रैबिट तो मिलेगा ही मिलेगा। लेकिन जब आप स्टैग पकड़ना चाहते हैं और आपका पार्टनर कहता है नहीं मैं तो रैबिट ही पकड़ूंगा, तो उसको तो रैबिट मिल जाएगा लेकिन आपको आपके हाथ में हिरन नहीं आएगा, क्योंकि आपका जो साथ चाहिए था, आपको जो एक कलेक्टिव आपका जो एफर्ट चाहिए था वो आपको नहीं मिला। तो यहाँ एफर्ट की या कलेक्टिव इसकी जो एफर्ट लगता है उसका ये रूपांतरण या रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, तो सर ने बताया। क्योंकि इंडिविजुअल या इस तरीके के एफर्ट जब लगते हैं तब आप ज्यादा दूर की आप नहीं सोचते, लेकिन जब आप बहुत सारे होते कलेक्टिव होते हो तब आपका दायरा बढ़ता है और आपका जो जिसको बोलते हैं ना एक्वायर्ड जो बेनिफिट्स है वो ज्यादा होते हैं। तो यहाँ हम एक देखते हैं कि जब हिरन पकड़ने वाले लोगों की तादाद ज्यादा होती है या ज्यादा लोग होते हैं जो हिरन पकड़ सकते हैं, तो हम देखते हैं कि उस ग्रुप को हिरन पकड़ने में ज्यादा वहां पर सहूलत है बनिस्बत अगर आपके पास उतने कैपेबल लोग नहीं है जो, तो वो चाहते हैं कि चलो हम तो भैया नहीं पकड़ सके, हम रैबिट या हेयर के ही चक्कर में जाएंगे। तो ये स्टैगनेंट का जो एग्जाम्पल ये क्या बताता है, ये बताता है कि जो ये दुविधा या द्वंद है, द्वंद क्या है कि हम या तो हम अपने हम इसमें रहे कि हम चलो रैबिट में ही खुशी मनाए अपने आप को, या फिर ज्यादा एफर्ट करके कलेक्टिव एफर्ट करके हम ज्यादा बेनिफिट एक्वायर करें। तो ये एक बहुत अच्छा एग्जांपल है स्टैगनेंट का, जिससे आपकी कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी या कलेक्टिव एफर्ट का और इंटरसेप्टिविटी का ये बहुत अच्छा रिप्रेजेंटेशन है सर।
Right. So we have put out the basic problem that we have, that everyone is either hunting rabbits or hares because we don't know if we can trust our partner to be hunting stags when we could actually get a bigger benefit out of it. So how do narratives help in this case? Because ideally it's not great to be hunting hares all by yourself, right? Because that means you will never trust your partner. So how do we get to that point where we will actually start trusting our partners to be able to do something much bigger? And we argue that narratives actually allow accessing an extended action set. So let me give an example. Humans are actually very good at this concept of counterfactuals, right? We are very good at saying if then, what if this happens, then I will do that. What if something else was happening? Then maybe I will not do that, right? You go to a restaurant, you ask, oh, can I get this and that? It's like, no, this you cannot. Okay, if not, then I will go for this other thing, right? You can make a choice and you can ask, do this if then and what if kind of arguments. A good example for that is like adjusting to holidays, right? You move from one place to another. You move from, say, one city to a different city in India. I was in Bangalore once and earlier this year, and we were not expecting there to be holidays for a certain uh, kind of celebration. And then we realized that, oh, actually there are holidays. So the conference that we had planned, we were the only ones there because no one else showed up because there was a holiday, right? So you have to kind of adjust to your holidays. You could say that, oh, I will go there, but I don't care about what's happening, and then I will just do my own thing. And if this is what we do, then we are the ones who suffer, right? Because then we didn't get any people over there. Instead, you have to take into account what's happening in that region or in that context, and then adjust according to that, because that was the collective belief at that place. So if you don't adapt yourself to that collective belief, maybe you should have changed your actions according to that, right? We should have adjusted the holidays of our conference also accordingly, and that would have helped. And to make it very clear for our example of hunting, let's say there are two different stories, right? Let's say there are two different stories in the population. Let's say story number one and story number two, right? These are the narratives. What do I believe in? One or two? If I believe in one, I have two different options: hunt hare or hunt stags. And let's say there is another narrative, right? Narrative number two, this story. And there again, I ask, what do I do? Do I hunt hare or do I hunt stags? Right? So if I giving this example of the conference, again, it's the idea is like, do I give a holiday or not give a holiday? Right? Given that we may have the conference somewhere else, do I give a holiday? Do I not give a holiday? Right? So these are the kind of things that what action set is going to dictate. These narratives are going to dictate the actions that we can choose. And to kind of show this, let's say this is how the strategies now look like. My first action was, given that there is story number one, it says I can hunt hare or I can hunt stags. Okay, that's the two options, right? Now, given that everyone around me believes actually in story number two, the collective belief is two. Again, there are two more actions, right? Either I can hunt hare or I can hunt stag, right? So now in total, there are four options, right? Hare, 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 stag, stag, hare, and stag, stag, right? Not only that, I also have my own belief, right? What do you personally believe in? Do you believe in story one or do you believe in story two? Right? When I go to a different place for the celebration over there, I can take part in the celebration, but I don't have to believe in the celebration, right? I can give a holiday, but I don't have to say that, I have to give the holiday because I will also go and relax. Maybe I can just go to my office and do my own work, right? I could do that. So what do you personally believe in? So that would be, let's say, one or two again, right? So that means now actually we have 8 different strategies, right? Now we can have hare, hare, and I believe in one, which is over here. Or it could be hare, hare, and I believe in two, which is over here. I could have stag, hare, and I believe in one, which gives me SH1. Or I could have stag, hare, and I believe in two, which gives me SH2, and so on, right? This is how we have 8 different strategies now. Should we explain this? Maybe.
Yes, sir. You can go ahead, sir.
Shall I go ahead? Okay. All right. Okay. So now we have 8 different strategies, and that's already way too much, right? That's too much complexity already. So let's think easier. Let's think simpler. Let's think of the case when everyone is just egoistic. So by egoistic, I mean they're just doing what is best for themselves, and that means hunting hares, right? Because for hunting hares, you don't need to depend on anyone else, right? So you just consider this population, which is everyone in the population is just HH1. Okay, everyone is HH1, and now they form a group of size G. They form a group of some size, and then they decide to go hunting. But we all know what is going to happen, right? We all know exactly what is going to happen. They all go out to hunt. They all go and hunt their own hares. So on an average, everyone is going to get whatever that hare value is, pH, let's say that the value of hare is pH. So everyone is going to just get pH. Not surprising at all. We knew that this is what's going to happen. Interesting thing is, what happens if you have a mixed group, right? If I have a mixed group, how do I say what does that orange individual get? What does that pink individual get? What does that blue individual get? How do I calculate that? Now things get a bit more tricky, and I think the audience is going to be a bit more, let's say, high school or slightly older level from that, but maybe you don't want to do a lot of mathematics because you maybe are interested in all different topics. So let's not do too much of mathematics, and let's just say that they go out again, same as before, form a group of size G, and then you just do some mathematics. I'm not going to talk about the mathematics over here, but in the end, what we want to calculate is, do you get the hare or do you get the stag? And all of this complicated thing is just a probability. It says that with this probability, I will get a hare. With this probability, I will get a stag. And I just add those together. So you can do some math and actually calculate what each of those colors will get. For each of that strategy can get, you can actually calculate it in this case. Okay.
तो अब ये देखें कि हम ये जो नैरेटिव्स की जर्नी है हमारी, क्यों क्यों किस तरह ये हमारे ऊपर असर करती है, और किस तरह हम इस द्वंद्व को ही हम अपने लिए कैसे यूज कर सकते हैं। तो सर ने काउंटर फैक्चुअल्स पे बात की कि अगर हम अ, हमारे पास दुविधा है या हमारे पास ये द्वंद्व है, तो हम देखते हैं कि हम भी अपने दिमाग में ऐसे प्लानिंग करते हैं कि अगर एक तरह से जाए, जैसे सर ने अपना एग्जांपल दिया कि कहीं अगर आपको जाना होता है किसी भी जगह पे, तो वहाँ की चीजें अगर कुछ कुछ दिन शुरू रहती है, कुछ दिन बंद रहती है, वो पता करके जाया जाए, या फिर ऐसे टाइम पे जाया जाए कि चलो चले जाते हैं, देख लेंगे हम बाद में। तो इस किस्म की दो स्थितियां जब आपके पास अवेलेबल है, तो आ, उस पर ये डिसीजन का द्वंद होना लाजमी है। तो यहीं पे हम हेयर स्टैक स्टोरी में सर ने जैसे बताया कि अ, इस किस्म का काउंटर फैक्चुअल हम यहाँ पे अप्लाई करते हैं। तो एक्शन सेट 1 और 2, जिसमें हेयर और स्टैग की बात हुई है, और इसी तरह से बाद में ग्रुप्स, जैसे जैसे ग्रुप्स फॉर्म हुए, जैसे कलेक्टिव बिलीव 1 है तो उसमें हेयर पकड़ा जाना चाहिए, कलेक्टिव बिलीव 2 है तो उसमें स्टैग पकड़ा जाना चाहिए। तो ऐसे जब लोग ऐड होते हैं, तो वहां पर इस किस्म की पॉसिबिलिटीज और एक्सपैंड होती है, और हम देखते हैं कि जैसे जैसे ग्रुप बड़े होते हैं, वहां पर ये स्ट्रेटेजीज जो है वहां पे बढ़ती जाती है। तो इसी का आधार लेके सर ने हमको बताया कि अ, इस किस्म की इस किस्म के परफॉर्म करने के लिए जितने भी आप कलेक्टिव या कितने भी बड़े ग्रुप में रहेंगे, उस पॉसिबिलिटी को अ, अ, एक बोलते हैं ना, अमली जामा पहनाने के लिए आपके उस कलेक्टिव डिसीजन के आधारशिला पे ही आप जान सकते हैं कि क्या वो रैबिट पकड़ा जाएगा या हिरन पकड़ा जाएगा या फिर दोनों का मिला जुला एक एक पकड़ा जाएगा। तो सर ने एक बात इसके बाद जो है शुरू किया, एक बताया था आपको कि अगर बेसिक सिचुएशन वन के हिसाब से जाए और एक ग्रुप जी फॉर्म किया जाए, उस सिचुएशन ए में सबको ग्रेविटी पकड़ना था और उसने बराबर अपने हिसाब से वहां गए और सभी ग्रुप ने मिलकर, आपको तो पता है सबको रैबिट पकड़ना था, तो उनको एक रैबिट का जो उन्होंने सोचा था उस तरीके का पे ऑफ या उनको एक रिजल्ट मिला। लेकिन ऐसा अगर ग्रुप हो जहाँ पे आप जानते नहीं कि सबको, किसी को रैबिट और हेड दोनों पकड़ना है, किसी को रैबिट और हिरन दोनों पकड़ना है, किसी को रैबिट और रैबिट ही पकड़ना है, किसी को सिर्फ स्टैग ही पकड़ना है, तो ऐसे ग्रुप को आप किस तरह से इसका पे ऑफ जानेंगे? ऐसे ग्रुप का आप जो का आउटकम कैसे जानेंगे? तो इसी का एक मैथमेटिकल कैलकुलेशन करके बेसिकली प्रोबेबिलिटी के आधार पर का कैलकुलेशन निकाला गया। और सर ने बेसिकली हमको एक फॉर्मूला बताए हैं और एक मोटा मोटी तरह से प्रोबेबिलिटी के आधार पे हम ये पाते हैं कि एक ग्रुप जो जी साइज का ग्रुप है, जिसमें रैंडम लोग हैं जो हेयर और स्टैग दोनों का मिला जुला है वो पकड़ना चाहते हैं, तो उनके मिले जुले एफर्ट से हम प्रोबेबिलिटी के माध्यम से कितने हेयर और कितने स्टैग हम पकड़ पाएंगे। तो वही स्ट्रेटेजी के अनुसार या जो कंबाइंड जो नैरेटिव का एक मिला जुला असर है उसके हिसाब से ये प्रोबेबिलिटी हम जनरेट कर पाते हैं।
Exactly. Very clear. Thank you. And exactly, once we know these payoffs now of each of the strategies, we can see what happens to the whole population. So let's go back to this easy. You have a population, everyone is doing the same thing, HH1, right? We know that everyone is hunting hares. Now let's say we compete this population of HH1 with another population, let's say SS1, right? SS1, we know what they're doing, right? They're hunting stags. Everyone is hunting stags, so they will be hunting stags. If anyone decides to believe in collective action too, they will still be hunting stags, right? Because that's the second S. And then it's one, because everyone believes in one. The thing is, we actually know what the outcome looks like, right? What does this strategy mean? This strategy means that I hunt hare when the collective narrative is one. It says I hunt hare when the collective narrative is two. That's the second H. And it says, but my personal narrative is one. And this population, everyone says that I hunt stag when the collective narrative is one. It says I hunt stag when the collective narrative is two. So actually, I hunt stag all the time. And my personal belief in the narrative is one, right? That's what it says for me. Now, we can not just do the comparison between these two strategies, which was exactly here, HH1 and SS1, right? And we saw this point in the middle, right? Just like the stag hunt game. Because we already know that for a hunt, for hunting only hares and only stags, there is this point in the middle on which you have to have the population of stag hunters to be more than the population of hare hunters, right? But the thing is, you can do this comparison for all the strategies, all 8 of them, using the formula that I showed earlier, actually. And what that tells us, that if you have these points, then you cannot cross them, right? So because we saw in this figure earlier, right, that there is this point, you need to be above this point to go to stag hunting. If you are below, you will stay hare hunting, right? And if that is the case, then it will be very tricky for us to actually get the whole population to be hunting stags. So that's why all the points which are in the middle Let me get back to that. All the points which are in the middle, we actually cannot use them because we cannot cross them. But we are starting here, right? We are starting here when everyone is egoistic, they're just doing their own thing, HH1, right? So let's focus our attention. We are at HH1. I said we cannot cross anywhere in the middle, so we don't care about that. Let's not look at that, right? So what is the thing that is remaining? Look here on the edge. What the edges are, these are called as neutral steps. And these are neutral steps because look what's happening here. This is HH1. Everyone is hunting hares, right? Now this strategy is called HS1, right? That means if everyone believes in strategy in the story number 2, then they would hunt stags. But the thing is, everyone here believes in strategy 1. Everyone over here also believes in strategy 1. So no one is going to think about story number 2, right? They are all thinking about story number 1. So there is no way that this population will be using stag hunting. And that means this population is basically the same as this population. And that's why this is a neutral step. So we can see some light red individuals in the dark red population, and they can move between these two populations. And now something interesting happens. Say, imagine now the population shifts from dark red to here light red, right? Because they are the same, you can move between them. Once you are here, look at what's happening over here on the right-hand side. Then you have HS2, right? There are some people over here who believe in story number 2. Well, I mean, all of them actually believe in story number 2, and then they will be hunting stags, right? But they look at what's happening in this population, right? In this population, everyone is playing, believes in story number 1, right? And just as I gave the example, just as Subodh gave the example, if you go to some other place, you look around what's happening, right? What is the story that they are telling? If the shops are closed, then there is no point going shopping, right? As these individuals come over here, they see that everyone believes in narrative 1, in story number 1, and in story number 1, what do I do, right? Well, in story number 1, I, as this greenish blue one, I should also be hunting hares, right? So that means as long as everyone believes in story number 1, I should be hunting hares. And that means these two strategies are actually the same as long as everyone believes in story number 1. And that's why these individuals, by chance, they can increase in the population. But as more and more people are of this blue-green type, what will happen? They slowly start believing in story number 2. Because the more people of this type are here, then they will start believing in story number 2. And as soon as they start believing in story number 2, even these individuals, the light red one, are hunting stags. So just because of changing their belief from story number 1 to story number 2, you can get a population to switch from hunting hares to hunting stags. So we don't really have to cross these hard points. You can actually go by a neutral step to one of these strategies, which will actually lead you to a stag hunting strategy. And if you see the way the figure is shown, all the strategies on the right-hand side, these are actually stag hunting strategies. And all the strategies on the left-hand side, these are hare hunting strategies. So if you see this is SS2, that means everyone believes in 2 and then they hunt stags. Here, everyone believes in 1 and then they hunt stags. And here, everyone believes in 1 and they hunt stags. And the thing is, by using the beliefs, with belief switching, which happens from 1 to 2, or from, in this case, 2 to 1, you can move from hare hunting to stag hunting. And that means you have converted a population which was doing things only for itself. The individuals were only working for themselves, hunting hares, but now they work together to hunt stags. Is this okay, or should we?
तो आगे बढ़ते हुए बेसिकली जब हमने देखा कि जिस स्टोरी वन में बिलीव करने वाले इन सबका एक कॉमन वो था कि तो यहाँ पे बेसिकली आप देखेंगे कि जो स्टोरी वन में बिलीव कर रहे हैं कि हेयर ही पकड़ना है स्टोरी वन में, और एक दूसरा है स्टोरी वन में जिनको स्टैग पकड़ना है। ऐसे दो सिचुएशन में क्या हम इन दो पॉपुलेशन में पॉपुलेशन को कंपेयर कर सकते हैं? तो हाँ, हमने किया कि देखिए यहाँ पे जो एकदम डार्क रेड है वहां पे हम देखते हैं कि इनको कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव वन रहा तो भी हैर ही पकड़ेंगे, कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव इनका टू भी रहा तो भी हंट हैर ही पकड़ने वाले। और मेरा पर्सनल बिलीफ जब वन रहेगा तब ये रेड वाले पॉपुलेशन पार्ट होंगे। यहाँ पर मैं हिरन या स्टैग तभी पकड़ूंगा जब कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव वन भी रहा तो, और मैं हिरन या स्टैग तब पकड़ूंगा जब कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव टू भी रहा, क्योंकि और मेरी पर्सनल यहाँ पे चॉइस नैरेटिव वन की है, लेकिन मैं कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव से ही यहाँ पे इन्फ्लुएंस होके यहाँ पे स्टैग पकड़ूंगा। तो अभी इस आधार पे अब ये जो इनके बीच में एक देखिए एक पॉइंट है, उस पॉइंट पर हम थोड़ा नेक्स्ट इसमें आगे आएंगे। तो ये पॉइंट दर्शाता है कि हेयर से स्टैग तक का जो वो है डिसीजन है उसके बीच की ये रुकावट, ये पॉइंट आपको दर्शाता है। तो नेक्स्ट जो आपका जो डायग्राम है इसमें ये इसकी और क्लैरिटी होती है। तो आप देखिए शुरुआत का पॉइंट है जिसमें नैरेटिव वन की बात हुई है जहां पर सबसे डार्केस्ट रेड आपको स्पॉट दिख रहा है, और जब सबसे जो ब्लूइश या जो रीजन है वहां पर आपको देख रहे हैं कि SS वन यानी स्टैग वाले नैरेटिव वन वाले वो होते हैं। तो आप देखिए यहाँ जो बीच में जो पॉइंट्स दिख रहे हैं जैसे सर ने बताया, ये पॉइंट्स वो चीज दर्शाती है, ये रुकावट है कि अगर इसके बिलो जो पॉपुलेशन एग्जिस्ट कर रही है वो शायद कभी भी स्टैग पकड़ने की हिम्मत नहीं करेगी, यानी वो केवल अपने रैबिट पकड़ने वाले ही जोन में रहेगी, और इस पॉइंट के ऊपर के हैं जो वो स्टैग पकड़ने की हिम्मत या स्टैग पकड़ने की कोशिशों में लगे रहेंगे। लेकिन क्या सिर्फ यही रास्ता है आगे पहुंचने का? क्या सिर्फ यही और अगर ये ब्लॉक रहा तो क्या वो पॉपुलेशन आगे बढ़ेगी नहीं? हेयर वाले हेयर ही पकड़ते रहेंगे और स्टैग वाले नहीं, ऐसा नहीं। तो सर ने एक यहाँ पर न्यूट्रल स्टेप्स की एक कंसेप्ट बताया है जहां पर ये देखा गया कि देखिए हेयर 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 वन नैरेटिव वाले और हेयर स्टैग वन नैरेटिव वाले ये भी क्लोजली जुड़े हैं, लेकिन ये हेयर स्टैग वन वाली जो पॉपुलेशन है वो ज्यादा इन्फ्लुएंस हो रही है HH1 से, कि उनको दिख रहा है कि हाँ ये बगल वाले रैबिट पकड़ रहे हैं, तो मोस्ट प्रोबेबली वो अपने पास के इससे ही इन्फ्लुएंस होके देखेंगे और शायद दोनों मिलके हेयर पकड़ेंगे तो वो पॉपुलेशन भी शायद यहाँ आके मिल जाए, और ये कलेक्टिव बिलीफ के चलते हाँ तुम भी हेयर पकड़ने वाले हो चलो हम मिल जाओ। लेकिन अब यहाँ पे और आगे जाते हैं तो हम देखते हैं हेयर स्टैग नैरेटिव टू वाले लोग हैं। अब ये हेयर स्टैग वन के भी एक एक ऐसे स्टेप से जुड़े हैं जहां पर वो दिख रहे हैं, उनको वो बिलीफ सिस्टम दिख रहा है कि हाँ अरे ये तो स्टैग पकड़ने की भी सोच रहे हैं, हमारे भी स्टैग पकड़ने वाले हैं लेकिन वो इतने कॉन्फिडेंट नहीं है। लेकिन बगल वाले देख रहे हैं हाँ वो तो स्टैग पकड़ने की हिम्मत दिखा रहे हैं। तो कुछ यहाँ पर देखे दिखाने में या बिलीफ सिस्टम एक तरह से एक्सचेंज होने में ये जो है पॉपुलेशन यहाँ भी शिफ्ट कर सकते हैं। और उस आधार पे हम देखते हैं कि आप लेफ्ट वर्सेस राइट भी देखिए तो लेफ्ट में मोस्टली हेयर या रैबिट पकड़ने वाले हंटिंग वाले लोग हैं, और यहाँ पर मोस्टली स्टैग पकड़ने की नियत रखने वाले लोग इन पॉपुलेशन में है। तो ये जो ब्लॉकेजेस है वो इस तरह से भी आप बाईपास, ये पॉपुलेशन बाईपास कर सकती है, ओनली टू चेक और ओनली ऑन द बिलीफ, ऑन द जो आपका इंटरेक्शन है या बिलीफ सिस्टम का इंटरेक्शन है, उसके आधार पे वो पॉपुलेशन भी वहां पर शिफ्ट हो सकती है और अपना जो स्टैग, हंटिंग स्टैग का जो एक दायरा है वो बढ़ाते हुए वो शिफ्ट करती जाती है। तो हम ये देखते हैं कि यहाँ बिलीफ सिस्टम और इंटरसब्जेक्टिविटी किस तरह वर्क कर रही है कि एक बिलीफ सिस्टम से दूसरे बिलीफ सिस्टम को की ओर ले जाए इस।
Right. Thank you. And and the thing is, where do these beliefs come from? I mean, just coming up with a new story, right? Like imagine coming up with this concept that I'm going to pay you with metal and you should give me food. It's a crazy story. So you have to somehow be able to convince someone else that this makes sense. But this belief is then actually very costly, right? Because to come up with this story, it takes some kind of a brain power. Like you really have to come up with a very convincing story that it will work, right? So that means coming up with the story has some cognitive cost. So if we say that the people who have these stories pay some kind of a cognitive cost, then what will happen, right? So here, these are the examples of, as you go from the top to bottom, you are putting in more cognitive costs, but the overall dynamic is basically the same. You start with red, which is mostly hare hunting, and you move towards the blue and green. As time passes, you move towards the blue and green, so which is hunting stags. So once you're hunting stags, as I said, those four strategies are neutral on the right hand side. So these four are all hunting stags. So these are neutral because they are joined by these neutral steps. As I mentioned, these dashed lines, they are neutral steps. So these strategies are same as each other. So that means if you put them in a population, they will have same proportion, which you see over here. But if I say that the ones who have this, who come up with this new story, they have some kind of a cognitive cost, and I increase this cost over here, then you see that everyone who has this second belief, they will be less in the population. But the ones who are surviving, they are still hunting stags, right? So here actually you see that the belief comes into the population, it transforms the population from hare hunting to stag hunting. It changes the population from being egoistic, from being selfish to being cooperative. And then the belief can actually go away. You don't have to keep on believing in the story. You can actually forget the story, but you end up being stag hunters. You end up being cooperative. And that's especially the case if the beliefs are costly. So to summarize this part, it says that the drift, so which is the case that we were trying to deal with, right? This was the hard case. This was the case when the stories did not mean anything. Right now, the stories, they don't mean anything. It was just story number one, story number two. But even in that case, the drift takes care of the belief in the narratives. And once the number of believers crosses a threshold, right? Once the believers have crossed a threshold, then the selection for narratives is triggered and the collective conviction, so this collective belief exerts a force in the real world. And this is something that we saw over here, right? When HS1 becomes HS2, when enough individuals start believing in story number two, then they switch their action. They switch their action from hunting hares to hunting stags. So that is when the story has an effect on an actual action. Until that point, it was just a story. It had nothing to do with the actions, right? So once the number of believers increases up to a certain above a certain threshold, then you see this collective belief, collective conviction exerting a force in the real world. And then the individuals who are believing in the narrative, they cooperate, they have a higher fitness, so they increase in population. right? The increase in the proportion in the population. And then they're cooperating with each other, then the cooperation is stable. And as we saw, the individuals can even forget what the actual story was that made them work together. What made them work together now, but it doesn't matter because now not working together is not even an option. That's not a rational choice. If we can come together and if we can hunt a stag, why should I go by myself and hunt a hare now? There is no reason I should do that anymore because we all agree that we have to hunt stags. And that's perfect then. And the cycle can actually then repeat with a different belief. You can have a different belief and come up with something bigger. It's like, okay, now we are able to hunt stags. Tomorrow we are going to go and hunt, I don't know, like a bigger animal like the mammoth, right? So that way you can actually convince people to do bigger and bigger joint action um, dilemmas, basically solve joint action dilemmas of bigger and bigger size. And these are just some of those beliefs which have helped us actually transfer, get over rather these kind of dilemmas: money, corporate entities, nations, societies, superstitions, religions, rituals. These are all examples by which people can come together and do something together, which was impossible to do by themselves. But the key thing about this is there is also a dark side for the beliefs, right? Because we did not say anything about what that story is supposed to be. Because the narratives and the fictions, whatever we tell each other, they only need to provide a higher payoff to the actor. We calculated this payoff, right? Using the formulas. So all it needs to be that payoff should be high. It does not tell us what you need to do, what information you need to put in the story for that story to be high. And that means even sensationalism or fake news can have the same effect. If you put sensationalism and fake news, you can get a group of people together to do something, right? So the story doesn't need to be true to get people together to actually to do something. And that's actually the idea behind information control in imagined societies, right? In imagined communities. This is a brilliant book by Benedict Anderson, who has reflections on the origins and spread of nationalism. And the idea behind this is how do you come up with a story and how do you spread that story the best to be able to change people's actions and behaviors at a very large scale. And some of the things that he does list out is like, okay, you need to have a good control over language, you need to have a good control over legacy of administrative structures, and whatever stories you are telling, they need to have an emotional appeal. Because we know this, for example, from the COVID pandemic and all, right? Like you can't just tell people facts. You can't throw numbers saying that these are the numbers, that's why this thing happens. No, no, no. You have to come up with a good story. You have to come up with a convincing emotional story to say why wearing masks is good, right? Because otherwise, post-truth is basically a very old concept. You can spread fake news and all, and that's a very old concept actually, because that's how old our stories are as well. So it's a very old concept in that sense. Um, I will come to the complexity, but maybe we could go once over this.
तो इन ये जो सर ने स्टैग का और इसका का एग्जांपल दिया, अब यहाँ हम देखते हैं कि बिलीफ का शिफ्ट जो है या किसी चीज एक चीज से दूसरी जगह आने का क्या कुछ हमको हर्जाना देना पड़ता है। तो सर ने बहुत अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन किया न्यूमेरिकली। यहाँ पर हम देख रहे हैं कि न्यूट्रल, जैसे हम सबसे पहली वाली जो पिलर देख रहे हैं, यहाँ पे देखा कि सब मोस्टली न्यूट्रल है और अब अपने 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 ही इसमें पॉपुलेशन के बिलीफ सिस्टम को जो जुड़े रहे हैं। पर जैसे ही शिफ्ट होता जा रहा है तो हम देख रहे हैं कि यहाँ पर कॉग्निटिव कॉस्ट जो है उसका जो हर्जाना है वो देना पड़ रहा है। यानी टोटली बिलीफ सिस्टम में जो एक तरह से पूरे तरह से उछाल उनमें या उनका पूरा सा पूरा चेंज हो रहा है। तो ये इस किस्म की जो शिफ्ट है, इस किस्म का जो चेंज है, ये एक कॉस्ट के साथ आता है। उसको सभी कॉग्निटिव कॉस्ट का नाम दिया है और वो आखिरी जो पायदान आप देखते हैं कि यहाँ पे प्रॉपर वहां पर स्टैग हंटर्स की एक जमात या इस तरीके की कॉन्फिडेंट लोग आपको पॉपुलेशन में दिखते हैं, जो इस कॉस्ट को बियर करके एक फाइनल अपने एक नए बिलीफ सिस्टम की तरफ वो आ, आते हैं। तो अभी इसको जैसे हम ये ड्रिफ्ट का जो कंसेप्ट था, स्टोरी का जो कंटेक्सचुअल वो था, तो उसको हम अ, उसी को हम देखते हैं कि ये नैरेटिव्स में जो बिलीफ का दर्जा है उस पर ये उसको ये बहुत अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन करता है कि क्यों मीनिंग्स जो है या समय समय पे कंटेक्स्ट जो है वो कैसे, ये ड्रिफ्ट जो है कैसे कैसे बदलते जाते हैं। क्योंकि एक तय लिमिट के बाद में जब बिलीवर्स आपके ज्यादा हो जाते हैं तो वो अपने साथ साथ अ, वो एक कन्विक्शन को पुश करते हैं और एक नई, जिसको पैराडाइम या एक नए एक रेलम की तरफ वो बढ़ते हैं। और जब ये कोऑपरेटिव या एक जैसे सोचने का या शेयर्ड मीनिंग का ये तैयार होता है तो इनका एक साथ रहना और एक साथ ग्रो करना भी बहुत ज्यादा कॉमन हो जाता है। अब इसके बाद भी स्टेजेस है, ऐसा नहीं कि ये स्टेज फाइनल हो। कॉपरेशन स्टेबल होने के बाद भी कुछ लोग उसको भी तोड़ के, बिलीफ तोड़ के भी आगे निकलते हैं। और लेकिन कुछ कुछ के दिमाग में होता है कि मैं बागी बन जाऊं, निकल जाऊं, लेकिन नहीं, क्योंकि ये सामाजिक मान्यता है इसलिए मैं यहाँ चिपके रहूंगा। मेरे यहाँ इंटरकास्ट मैरिज नहीं होती तो मैं नहीं करूंगा, लेकिन मेंटली मैं बिलीव जरूर करता हूँ इसमें। तो अभी ये भी हम देखा है, सर ने बताया कि कुछ कुछ जो है एक ही चीज है, लेकिन उसकी डिफरेंट बिलीफ के साथ में वो रिपीटेटिव उसका हमने स्टेजेस देखे। जैसे मनी है या पावर है, उसको लेकर के अलग अलग कंटेक्स्ट में अलग अलग तरह से बिलीफ सिस्टम उजागर हुए हैं, बड़े हुए हैं। कॉर्पोरेट या जिस तरह से पहले व्यापार होते थे उसको लेकर के, देश या समाज की तरफ से, धर्म या सुपरस्टिशन, रिचुअल्स। और जैसे हम देखते हैं कि सर ने शुरुआत में ही बता दिया था कि ये स्टोरी टेलिंग की चीज है, और स्टोरी टेलिंग यानी मेक बिलीव का है। तो हम देखते हैं, हम आजकल तो वो एआई की वजह से तो और ज्यादा सेंसेशनलिज्म और फेक न्यूज का चलन चल रहा है। तो सर ये बता रहे हैं कि ये नई चीज नहीं है, हमेशा से समाज में होती रही है और अपने अपने तरीके से लोगों ने ये क्रिएट किया है। और बेनेडिक्ट एंडरसन की सर ने बुक का रेफरेंस दिया है जहां पर बताया गया कि किस तरह से कॉन्शियसनेस बिल्ड की गई है, और एक तरह से एक कॉमन ग्राउंड बिल्ड किया गया है, और उसमें भाषा, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव स्ट्रक्चर्स, और जिसको हम कहते हैं बात करने का तरीका या इमोशंस से खेलने की चीजें, ये सब का आधार हमेशा दिया जाता है। और पोस्ट ट्रुथ जो आजकल बहुत कॉमन चीज है, प्रोपोगेंडा पोस्ट ट्रुथ जो बोलते हैं, ये कोई नई चीज नहीं है, ये हमेशा ही समाज को ड्राइव करके आ रही है।
Right. Thanks. Um, and so I'll just briefly mention this last part because I think we might be running out of time. And then uh, this is about the complexity of where do these beliefs actually come from and how do they spread, right? Because we just talked about the whole mechanism, but it made quite some assumptions that human society is all mixed, everyone talks with everyone, and just exactly as Subodh mentioned, but that's not how society works, right? Our society is structured, our society is fragmented, and we need to take that into account. So when you look at a population, it's not like everyone is connected to everyone. Some people are connected more to other people, some people are connected less. And there are different ways in which you can actually represent uh, populations. And there are different kinds of models which actually are used to represent the populations. So we put our population on these kind of networks. Let's say you have a social network, right? I mean, how does it look like? It looks something like the Newman Watts robots, so like this network, right? or it might look as a Barabasi Albert. Depending on the size of the network and all, you can actually quantify these things. But the thing is, the point is that human populations are somehow structured. So the way we showed earlier that everything spreads just to everyone, which was over here, that was a very simple model, but not very realistic. You can look at some more realistic models like here. And if we do our same model that we did before with those 8 different strategies, like here, you start everyone with HH1, everyone hunting hares, as we decided before. Then you can see what happens on the networks, right? You immediately saw that the Watchdogs network, it became blue very quickly, and the others are still flickering, and the things are changing. So the thing is, in this model, we showed that you can actually go to stag hunting, but in a structured population, one can show that that is not very easy. It might take some time to actually get there, depending on how your structure looks like. And if that is the case, we can actually ask the question, if I know how my population looks like, if I know how structured the population is, if I want to make a change in my society, if I want to make a change in people's behaviors by spreading a new belief, which actually you see that it still happens over here, it took a much longer time as compared to the others. But if I want to make the change, then I need to know where should I start, right? Do I go to the person who is a big influencer and tell them to do it and then tell them to spread a big story? Or do I start in a very small village in grassroots levels and start it right from there? And what we find in our study that it may be possible actually to strategize to ignite social change for good, right? If you want to spread change for good by changing people's behaviors, it actually is worth by introducing these novel beliefs, these new concepts to actually less connected individuals. And it might sound counterintuitive, like why? I mean, if I want to spread something, I should go to the influencer, right? And then let them kind of spread. You use a big mic and then talk about it to everyone that you know. But actually, that's a problem because exactly what we discussed earlier, spreading a new belief is costly. It's not very easy. If someone starts coming and saying that, no, no, we should always change all the things that we have been believing in, maybe people don't believe them actually that much because everyone else is not going to change. So actually what we see is that if you start slower, start with people who are actually less connected, you have more of a chance that those people will survive and actually spread their ideas to the next generation. So the idea over here is that grassroots level change is actually important if we want to make societal change in any way possible. And this is basically the last kind of point that I want to make from our studies. What I just wanted to say that socio-technology of collective narratives, because we can tell stories in different ways, right? You have oral traditions, just telling stories to each other. We tell stories via pictures, movies, you know, artwork. That's also a part of storytelling. Written word, novels, books. That's also part of storytelling. And all of this requires some fundamental it has some fundamental requirements of from the society, which is we depend and on biology, which is like we depend on complex language for spreading those stories. We also depend on religions, also on government structures, and we depend from tablets to constitutions, like what are the rules and regulations that one must follow. All of these things are actually built by storytelling, right? Different ways of narratives actually lead in to some of those things that we see around us that govern our lives, like language, governments, and laws, because all of those things are actually built on collective narratives. And I would just like to reiterate that no one ever made a decision because of a number. And this was a very cool quote by Daniel Kahneman, who only recently passed away. And he said that no one makes a decision because of a number, right? You tell them that these many people died of COVID, so we should be careful. That's not helpful. You need to tell them a story that this is how dangerous the disease is. This is what happens to a person. This is how terrible it is. This is what will happen to families. If you tell a story, you can touch people's hearts much better and you can change their behavior. So what they need actually is a story. And with that, actually, I would like to thank everyone and मला बोलवल्याबद्दल फारच खूपच धन्यवाद. We can go over the last part again once more.
यस,
It's
लाइक क्विकली आई गो. तो इसमें अब आ जाते हैं इसी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी की ओर. जैसे हमने पहले मॉडल देखा स्टैग हेयर टू स्टैग हंटिंग का, लेकिन वो बहुत एक छोटा मॉडल था, वो बहुत एक जिसको हम कहते हैं बेसिक सा मॉडल था. अभी हम देखते हैं कि हमारे पॉपुलेशन स्ट्रक्चर ऐसे नहीं है, हमारे यहाँ बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स पॉपुलेशन स्ट्रक्चर. जुड़ाव जो है, सामाजिक नेटवर्क है, बहुत अलग है. यहाँ पे सर ने 3 एग्जाम्पल दिए. एक ईआर मॉडल है जो रैंडम है, एक स्मॉल वर्ल्ड मॉडल है, और एक प्रेफरेंशियल अटैचमेंट वाला मॉडल. अब यहाँ देखते हैं हम हेयर टू स्टैग यहाँ पे ट्रांसफर करना कौन से मॉडल्स में आसान है, किसमें किसमें नहीं. सर ने बहुत अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन किया. यहाँ हम देखते हैं जहाँ पर बहुत ज्यादा नेटवर्क्स बहुत रिजिड है, जटिल है, वहाँ ये बिलीफ सिस्टम को तोड़ना थोड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है. और वहां पर आप ज्यादा आप नई स्ट्रेटेजीज इंट्रोड्यूस करना वहां पर दिक्कत ही जाती है. तो आप ये जान ले कि आपको अगर सामाजिक चेंज या ऐसी कोई नई कंसेप्ट अगर इंट्रोड्यूस करना है, तो आप किसी जिसको ना एग्जिस्टिंग बिलीफ सिस्टम को जाकर आप झकझोड़ नहीं सकते. वो आपको रजिस्ट करेगा, वो आपको बोलेगा कि ये क्या बता रहे हैं. इससे अच्छा सर कहते हैं कि ऐसे नेटवर्क्स के तरफ जाओ जो वेल कनेक्टेड नहीं है, जो शायद इस तरह से एक्सपोज्ड नहीं है. उधर आप जाओगे, वहां पर नई चीजें आप बताओगे, तो वहां पर सामाजिक चेंज को ज्यादा रिस्पॉन्स मिलेगा, मे भी बहुत ज्यादा आपको अटेंशन से लिसन करेंगे. तो ये चीजें जो है इस तरीके से मेरे लिए भी बहुत नया ये कंसेप्ट, ये बायोलॉजिकल और इसके पर्सपेक्टिव से हमने देखा. और सर ने इसी को अभी नए जमाने के हिसाब से ढाला है कि अभी जो कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव्स है वो किस तरह से पनपते हैं, किस तरह से जारी होते हैं. जैसे हमारे मौखिक और ओरल है, विजुअल है, जो सबसे ज्यादा इम्पैक्टफुल है आज के दौर में. रिटर्न है, हमेशा से देखा है कि डॉक्यूमेंटेशन को पोथी पुराण से लेके बाइबल वगैरह सब इसको बहुत वैल्यू थी, और उस वजह से ये नैरेटिव जो कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव तैयार हुए. और आज जो है सर ने इसको सोशियल टेक्नोलॉजी ऑफ कलेक्टिव नैरेटिव्स कहा है, जिसमें लैंग्वेज का या भाषा का असर, गवर्नेंस का, धर्म का असर, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, इसको हम ये कहते हैं कि एक जो एग्रीड अपॉन जो आधारशिला होती है हमारे लिए, उसको लेकर हमने बहुत अच्छे से ये एक्सप्लेन किया. सर, और किसी भी चीज को कन्विंस करने के लिए केवल नंबर ही काफी नहीं होती है, आपको उससे जुड़ती हुई आपको एक स्टोरी भी या उसको कन्विंसिंग एक आपको अपना एक वो रखना होता है. और डैनियल kahneman के इस कथन के साथ ही सत्य इसको किया है. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर. मैं चाहूंगा अगर सवाल पूछने के लिए कुछ भी गुंजाइश है तो people can ask their questions to sir. सॉरी सर, ते ना को होस्टिंगचं ते झालंय. हा सर.
right.
सुबोध सर तुम्ही
Thank you
विचार.
thank you very much, Chaitanya. First, let's take some questions. कोणाचे प्रश्न असतील तर विचारा. YouTube वरून पण असतील तर तिकडे तुम्ही chat वरून टाकू
हा
शकतील. So Chaitanya, I wanted to share with you an additional. So you must be familiar with Ernest Renan's theory of a nation as well. It's
right.
it's the other side of the story of Benedict Anderson, and he adds that forgetful. I'm reading a quote here. Forgetfulness and I would say historical error are essential in the creation of a nation. Historical research, by revealing unwanted truths, can even endanger nationhood. All
Totally.
nations even the most benevolent in later practice are founded on acts of violence, which are then forgotten.
Mhm.
So I think key in this, the point he's raising, flagging, is that in this belief change, as well
Mhm.
is the negative side of it, which is that people have to, also forget in order to share a common narrative. So forgetting is a very crucial part, and I think if you look at some
Totally.
parts of the world, like the Balkans, they do not forget. Whereas
Yeah.
if you look at places like France, they've forgotten a brutal civil war where millions were killing each other not much more recently. So really,
No, no.
really fascinating insight.
Forgetting is
Yes.
extremely, and I think forgetting is extremely important. And one of the things which I would say that's also the reason why I um, kept on stressing that complex language and religions and governance structures, they are all built by such collective narratives. But how do we choose the exact collective narratives, right? Filtering of this, because it's not just forgetting in general, it's selective forgetting, right? They really choose, like, if you want to have an effective religion or an effective governance structure or effective laws, then one really needs to make sure that that they're convincing enough on a large scale. It's something that you see the example that you mentioned about the Balkans that fits perfectly actually right now, because you do have, even during the current war which is going on with Ukraine, one of the requirements that Russia said that they would like to have for a ceasefire, in many of the demands, one of them was also bringing back the language in school, teaching a different history, teaching, and this is extremely important from their point of view, because if you can control the kind of thoughts, kinds of ideas, kind of stories which are the future generation is going to hear, that will completely change what the current happenings were for. And you're completely right. So if you can enforce forgetfulness, like enforce forgetting certain facts, then that will definitely go a long way, because these things work at a very different time scale sim than one person's lifespan. So for sure, yes, yeah, that's a very important point. I agree. I think there were some chats.
नो, नितेश विचार मराठीत पण तुम्ही विचारू शकता
Right.
त्यांना. Any questions from YouTube, Nilesh Dada?
So maybe I can ask another question then. So how do you foresee? So very crudely, there are certain societies that are high trust and certain societies that are very low trust, and some societies transition from high trust to low trust over time because of what happens through their history. So what insights do you have for transitioning from a low trust to a high trust society? From your analysis, is this something that is very, very difficult? Or and
Um,
if so, how would the path go from a low trust place to a high trust place?
mhm. First of all, I have to kind of come clean. These are extremely simple toy models, as you might know, right?
Mm,
I skipped over quite a few mathematics, which sometimes it can get involved, but in the end, we're comparing it to human societies, and so in that sense, definitely these are extremely simple toy models. To check about the switching values, like about the switching probabilities between low to high trust and high to low trust, I feel one of the most important things which we do not consider over here is actually the resource. We do not talk anything about the resource dynamics. So for example, I talked about hunting hare and hunting stags and things like that, but you can think of that as any other resource which basically the society is building on. And that is something which is very crucial to model as well. How much of the resource is actually available to that community? What is the rate of depletion of that resource? If I keep on hunting stags, and that's a great thing to do, but if everyone is actually hunting stags, maybe we just drop that resource, and that's not a sustainable thing to do in the long run. So maybe making a full transition to stag hunting is actually not a good thing in that sense. So maybe there needs to be some kind of a balance. So my point is, like, this is an evolutionary model, but what we need actually is an eco-evolutionary model where we take the ecology, we take
mm,
the environment also into account, and that will give us a better picture, a better handle on why some societies are able to make the transition and some societies not, or at least
mm.
putting them in context of the resource availability. And I think that would give us a better, fuller picture.
Hmm.
So yeah, there is more to be done.
Chaitanya sir, if like you could like briefly tell like what kind of, see, there are cognitive costs I could like get, but in terms of evolutionary aspect, like we develop certain abilities when we shift beliefs and all. So, is
Mhm.
there any like research, or is there any model which could like guess that exceptional? Because some people like they think like beyond the obvious and all thing,
Mhm.
but some people cannot do. So that is also, I think, an effect of this kind of transfer of belief, or even the growth aspect. So is there anything like you could shed light upon?
So for this, a lot of people have been looking at anthropology, and anthropologically, like the argument is that about 40,000 years ago, around that time, the so far that's what the story goes, is that so far that we know that at that point humans are supposed to have gone through something known as the cognitive revolution. And in the cognitive revolution, I mean, this has been traced from brain sizes and the composition of what the cultural artifacts that we can still find at that point. And the argument is that the ability to to be able to take perspective taking is something which is very important, because if I want to imagine what you are going to be doing, I need to put myself in your shoes. So being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes has been extremely important in being able to come up with collective narratives. And the argument was that it was more or less around that time that that's when we started to have this kind of ability. Now, if it increase the skull size and something, that's a clear physical cost as well, because that's a biological cost. That means like how many babies were being born with larger brains than what is possible for reproduction to happen, right? I mean, that's a cost which one has to bear, plus the cognitive cost, which in a more societal manner, like if you come up with a crazy idea, will the people around you accept you? Because we see this even currently in societies where, for example, you have shamans or kind of, like some kind of crazy people who are just wandering, and then you can see that that's some level of an outcast from the society, from the societal structure. And so that means that's a cost, that's a societal cost that one pays. Manveer Singh has been working very on such kind of work. So I would also recommend the work by Manveer Singh, who works exactly actually on shamanism and what is the role of such people actually in societies.
Actually, we are okay. Nilesh, Dada, you can ask Nilesh Dada.
Uh,
Uh, Hello, Chaitanya.
yeah,
I
hi.
wrote my question.
Yes. So the question is, in everyday human experiences, do stories and shared narratives only help build trust, or can they also lead to distrust, violence, or disbelief? And yes, that they totally can. And this is exactly what I meant by also over here, that sensationalism and fake news. And the narratives only need to provide a higher payoff to the actors, and the content doesn't matter. And here I said that the content doesn't matter. But that also means that it could go the other way, right? And that's also what I mean. Like the model would still work even if it's actually a disruptive activity, because in that case, what you need to do, well, what you would not want to do, but what happens is you still have a trust between a group of people. There is a trust, and they share a narrative which is between a group of people, but it is directed maybe to someone else. It's directed maybe to some resource, like directed against some other people, some other resource, some other material or immaterial uh, concept. And if that is the case, that means it still works with this framework, but the story doesn't need to be true. And if the story doesn't need to be
Right.
true, clearly it has like it can create an us versus them mentality, because some people believe in it, some people don't, and that's basically enough to
Right.
have distrust. One of the directions that we haven't explored in this work is what if the stories actually tell you what to do, right? Because right now we had the stories without any content, but what if the content of the stories actually tell you that, oh, there needs to be more exploitation of the resource or less exploitation of the resource, or you need to work only with people who have pink hair, or whatever kind of
Yeah.
arbitrary decision making
Yeah.
suggestions the story does, and that can also have a long lasting effect.
So actually, we are actually short of time, and also sir has taken this valuable time for us. तो मैं चाहूंगा कि जिनके भी सवाल है भी वो शायद पूछ नहीं पा रहे हैं, या मे भी जो यूट्यूब पे ज्वाइन करेंगे, तो वहाँ यूट्यूब पे आप लिखिए या डिजिटल नालंदा के कम्युनिटी पेज पे आप वो सवाल रखें, और आपके सवाल वी विल पुट फोर्थ टू चैतन्य सर.
We're happy to
And
do.
yeah, so thank you so much, Dr. Chaitanya sir, for like actually introducing us to this amazing field, and also changing a perspective basically to look at things, and also
Yeah.
and this branch of interdisciplinary sciences between like theoretical biology and also the aspects of cultural studies which we are like into. So it was amazing to like learn about these things. I Gokhale सरांसोबतच बोथ सर नेहमीच आमच्या नेहमी पुश करत असतात, and because of him we are able to conduct these amazing talks and lectures. So thank you both sir तुम्हारा पण. And next time,
Yeah.
next
Thank you, Subodh,
expert
sir.
सोबत आपण list करू.
And
Thank
thank you, Chaitanya. Thank
Yeah,
you, Subodh, sir.
exactly. Subodhla Sudha and Nilesh sir tomorrow.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chaitanya. It was a really amazing talk. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I'll be in touch over email about stuff. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Looking forward.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you and
Bye.
Jackie everyone. Bye.